At Edwards, we appreciate the value of the patient perspective. It's what guides us in all the work that we do here. Today, we have the great pleasure of hosting a series of virtual patient listening sessions where patients and their loved ones will share with us their unique experiences navigating their journeys. In addition to providing us inspiration, stories like these can help inform our product development and motivate us to innovate. On behalf of all of us here at Edwards, thank you to the people who are sharing their journeys with us during this virtual patient experience. And with that, I invite you to listen, learn, and be moved.
All right, hi everybody. Welcome to Edwards Lifesciences Critical Care Patient Listening Session. I'm Lee Oakland. I'm Senior Director of International Government Affairs, and I've been with Edwards about 13 years, and I get to be the moderator for today's session. And I thought maybe maybe if we could just start out by having you each introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and tell us the year that the sepsis journey began. Darrell, let's start with you.
Okay, my name is Darrell Raikes, and we live in Lebanon, Kentucky. And then
and the year
my journey started on May 26, 2015.
And I'm his wife, Sarah, and I was there from day one as the journey began as well.
Right,
and we've been together since 1983, and we've been married since 1987. So we have been together for a long, long time.
Yes, you have. Wow. And I know you have a remarkable story to tell. So Darrell is a sepsis patient, and Darrell and Sarah do have this remarkable story that they're going to share with us. Before we get there, if I could just ask you to share with us one word that would represent the beginning of your journey, and maybe one word for how you feel now. And Darrell, we'll start with you.
Normal at the beginning.
Okay.
Purpose now.
Okay. Can I ask a little bit more about the purpose?
You can. I was an engineer before I got sick, and I found out that by getting sick and being in the hospital, by sharing my story with others and getting awards and traveling, that was my new purpose in life. And what God had given me to do was to help others. That's my purpose, is helping others.
Okay, and we're going to get in. I hope we can kind of do a deep dive in that here in a minute. Sarah, how about your one word for the beginning of this journey?
Uncertainty, because it all happened so quickly. I really had no idea what was going on and was not prepared in any way. So it just, I would say uncertainty. Everything happened from one day to the next. And then I would say it's the end, perseverance, never giving up and facing each challenge as it arises. And I guess I'd have to say commitment too, that I've always been committed to Darrell and to our relationship and to supporting him. So that's probably cheating in more than one word, or it's actually two or three, but that's what I would say.
That's what we want. Thank you for that. Well, why don't we just dig into it? Darrell, do you want to just start with the beginning and just walk us through the journey? And I know probably Sarah, you'll jump in it because there's going to be times when, perhaps Darrell didn't really know what was going on, and you were the one that really, can fill in the holes for us there. Darrell, do you want to begin?
Well, it all started on May 26, 2015. We drove to Lexington, Kentucky to have a partial knee replacement. And the last thing I remember is getting on the elevator to go up to be operated on. And even though I talked and texted and moved during my stay for 2 days at what we call what is it? Well, it was the previous hospital before Good Sam Hospital.
Okay. That's there in Kentucky.
Yes.
Okay.
And even though I did normal things, I even walked down the hallway with my knee, and but I don't remember it. All that was gone.
And I'll just input here from the very beginning. I was sitting and waiting for him to come out, and from the very beginning, I should have known because we've been to this before. But from the very beginning, it was different. he didn't come immediately out. I sat and waited in the waiting room for my call. And finally, when I got the call, I said, well, he's having a little trouble breathing. So they actually moved him to telemetry wing. So he wasn't actually on the wing from the beginning with the other knee patients. So just from the beginning, but everyone thought he was just having some breathing issues, which sometimes happens after you've had anesthesia, and they were being precautious as such.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry to interrupt, but did the breathing issues happen when you were in the operating room, when he was in the operating room, or had he already come to recovery and then?
He was still in the I think he was still in the operating room, but it was after they brought him out. Brought him from under the anesthesia. So from the beginning, he was having some issues. So he was probably in recovery for 2 hours, because I said a long time, everyone else got their call about their loved ones. And I'm kind of like, why have I not gotten my call? And then even then, like I said, they moved him to telemetry, which was very odd. Normally they put him in the knee recovery wing as such. And so throughout, they kept telling him, they gave him that little thing to breathe on, and he was very coherent. He was talking, carrying on the conversation. And I'm a pretty upbeat person, so I was encouraging, you need to breathe and do all those things. So he was borderline right at around the 90% on the oxygen, and you have all those machines beeped up, so whenever it'd go down it'd beep, and through the night it just kept getting worse and worse, and finally they drew a blood gas, or come to find out he only had 40% oxygen, and at that point things changed drastically. But something that he said I think is really important to remember is his oxygen levels were so low, even though you wouldn't have known talking to him, he has no memory of any of that. He talked to his brother on the phone, sent him a message. When we had to make the decision of what to do next, I can remember asking him, and he asking me, but he doesn't remember that. He has I'm kind of glad I don't know that now, because that would have put even more pressure on me, right, because of the decision that was made. But so he was so low on oxygen, he has no memory of any of that at all.
So when did they give you a diagnosis of sepsis? And did they tell you how that occurred, or what actually happened?
I don't know that my wife ever knew while I was in the hospital. The first time I found out was when I got my medical records 3 months after I got out of the hospital. And I saw in there where I had sepsis and ARDS and all this stuff. I didn't have a clue.
Oh, wow.
It was never mentioned to me.
We had so many, this is a very long story. Okay. There were so many issues. It basically, from the beginning, was just told to me that he was basically bleeding from the lungs, and they couldn't figure out how to stop it. The term sepsis may have been used, but I won't lie to you, it was such an emotional roller coaster. We were dealing with symptoms one day at a time. So, from the beginning, when they first, and I can't even tell you her name because it was a different nationality, but I'll never forget, she was a fellow, and she was the first one that came in and said to us, and he doesn't remember it, but she said to us, and she was very businesslike, and I always thought, well, you could be a little more compassionate, but now I understand. She looked at me, but I now understand why she was. She knew how serious things were, and I had no idea. I had no clue what was coming or the journey we were about ready to take. But she looked at me and she said, bottom line, she said, the only way that he is going to survive is if you put him on a ventilator. Well, would say your typical a person, when you hear ventilator and life support, you think death immediately. I was just drawn back by that. I don't come from a medical background. And so I can remember him looking at me and him saying, well, sis, what should I do? Mm-hmm. And I was kind of now that I know, I'm so glad I know now that I didn't know then that he didn't remember, because I looked at him and I said, honey, we'll do whatever it does to save your life. If this is what we've got to do to save your life, then that's what we'll do. If I had known the journey we were going to take and that he wouldn't remember, I probably couldn't have lived with myself if he hadn't made it, because I guess ultimately I made that decision, and that's a hard decision to make. But in my mind, we were making it together, even though he doesn't remember. And so immediately, once we signed those papers.
And actually, I'm going to break you.
Okay.
I signed the paper to be put on a ventilator, but I don't remember it. So if she'd have made the call not to put me on a ventilator, I mean, I would have died and wouldn't have known.
But they all thought he was still no one realized that. I guess he didn't realize what he was doing. But we made it together, or I thought we did, even though he doesn't remember.
Right.
But it was immediate after that. As soon as we signed those papers, they rode us down the hall. And I'll be honest, that's probably the hardest thing we went through a lot. But that was extremely difficult. I felt truly alone. I was up there by myself, and not meaning that I didn't have support, and we'll talk about later some of that. But, here he is, they're taking him to his room, they're going to put him on the ventilator. I mean, I just can't even tell you how emotional it was. And so when it come time, I went and held his hand, and he looked at me and he said, "Sis, don't let me die." And I mean, here I'm trying to hold it together. I'm already tired and exhausted because, we hadn't slept. So I leave, and the whole time, faith is very important to both of us. So I'm in a little side waiting room all by myself, and praying the entire time. And a young girl comes out, and I can remember just offering me support. She was kind of like a nurse's aide. But when they called me back in after he'd gotten under the ventilator, he was still jumping. I mean, I guess he was still fighting. And that was the hardest thing, to watch him fight being on the ventilator. I didn't think about it at the time. It was just so emotional. But that was extremely that roller coaster of a ride. And then immediately after that happened, they whisked him in, and then they have to take him to UK. And he gets to go on the ambulance, and I can't ride an ambulance. So I have to go to the parking garage. I have to get in my car. I have to drive in a big city, and it wasn't very far, but when you're from a small town.
Sure.
And it's late at night. It's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
So they
get him to UK. And then once we get there, I have to again go to the waiting room. I can't be with him. They sit me out in the waiting room. It was packed. It was on a weekend because any kind of trauma emergency came to that area. Mm-hmm. So while I was there was a serious motorcycle like competitive accident. And so it was full of people. So here I am. I don't know anybody. And, I'm worried about Darrell. I don't really know what's going on. And then while I'm there, one of those individuals, apparently the gentleman, one of the boys, ended up losing his leg. Mm. And so it was so busy, the mother on the phone was told by the doctor, "Hey, your son's lost his leg." And so it was just, to be honest, after that, I could never stay in that waiting room when they would, because there were lots of times.
That's a lot of bad memories there now. Yeah. I'm just wondering, could you just clarify for me a little bit the timing on this? So when did you get intubated and moved to UK? How many days after your surgery, or was it immediately? Was it that night?
No.
I don't remember now.
No, it was, what was the date that you did surgery?
May 26th is when they operated on me.
Okay, so we were supposed to go home on the 27th. So I'm thinking it was like the 29th. It was like a couple of days.
Okay, a couple of days. Then you went to University of Kentucky Hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I understand. They intubated him at Good Sam first, and then they transported him emergency room, and it was late at night. Like I said, it was dark.
Okay. Good. And then how long were you there? What was the entire length of stay?
I was counting rehab, hospitals and everything, I was in the hospital 58 days.
58 days. So it sounds like there were a lot of complications. And you, I think I had read somewhere, Darrell, I read your blog, you had had a normal knee surgery before this, right? So
Yes.
and you were told then later that it was a reaction to the anesthesia that
Yes.
that caused the lung bleeding that eventually
Yes.
became septic, right? Which caused the
Yes.
infection, which became the problem. Okay. Tell us a little bit about what it was like when you did become cognizant of where you were and that you were in ICU, and what was that like?
Well, when I woke up and I knew I was sick, I knew I was in a hospital, and I had all these hoses and machines, beeping and going off. And I had tears in my eyes, and I looked up at Sarah and I said, let me die. I don't think I could talk. Maybe I moved my lips. I don't remember, but I just said, let me die. And I did. I wanted to die. And then, I don't know, just like Sarah said earlier, just every day was a different challenge, something else, that they had to do. I remember them, coming in there and checking the hoses and things they had hooked up to me. And then I had a chest tube put in. So
That's a lot. Were there any? There were a lot of surprises, I'm sure. Were there any good surprises that occurred during that 58-day stay?
Yes. Well, I'll let her tell the ones while I was asleep, and then she can tell the one, or I'll tell the ones after I woke up.
Okay, so as I said before, we went up there. First of all, I never left. So I never left. So I was
for
there
58 days.
I never left. I was there the entire time, right to the very, very end. I left one day, and that was a reason that I went. And he encouraged me to go, but I mean, I never came home for anything. I stayed there entire time, and at the time, it was the old building, so there was no restroom, no shower, no nothing in his room, no extra bed. I slept in a corner in a chair that reclined. So from the beginning, I think for me, the good stories definitely was the way that I was treated by the hospital staff. In the very beginning, it was just so scary, but I think quickly the nurses and staff, they realized I was there for the long stay. And they had pretty strict protocols about, not having any food or drink or, not camping out. And basically that's what I did. I camped out. And to the point where, and I was very protective of him because I'll be honest, the way that he looked, his dignity was not intact. And it was extremely important for me that his dignity be intact. And I didn't want people gawking and staring at him. So I was very protective about people seeing him and coming in, and that type of thing. A prayer chain. I had lots of support though. If I needed a tube of toothpaste, all I had to call and somebody would bring it. It didn't matter what I needed, it would show up. But the nurses were so wonderful. Like they found me a place on the 5th floor to take a shower. They would bring me towels. Just all those little things that were important. And they included me in his care. They would say, it's okay to talk to him. And I would touch his cheek and stroke and talk to him. And like whenever they came to do anything, they explained it to me. They included me as almost as another nurse, as a caregiver, as such.
That's great.
But while we were there, I turned 50. I had my 50th birthday. And so the nurses decorated the room.
Nice.
And celebrated. And then we also had our wedding anniversary there. And again, they decorated the room and celebrated. So it's like they treated as a person. And then the other thing is, because we were long haulers, it's like they were very protective of he and I. So like we had wonderful nurses, but we had some that were great and some that were exceptional. And so at nights were the hardest. So sometimes some of the exceptional nurses would look at who was on the schedule, and they were real particular about who they wanted to make sure took care of us.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
so can you tell me a little bit about the recovery? So you woke up and
You want the good points? You want the good points?
well, I'm trying to, I know that it was really tough when you first woke up, and I can, where you were suffering so greatly. Tell me about the journey to healing then after that.
You want to take the good points first?
You want the good points also, or you don't?
I want you, absolutely.
Okay. They would take the nurse would take a little sponge, dip it in the cup and water, and rub it on my lips. And I don't think I could talk, but I was trying to draw a picture or something, or no, I couldn't even move my arms. But they understood what I wanted. I asked them, could they put some watermelon juice in with the water? And that night, a nurse came back in with 3 pieces of watermelon in a cup, and she took the watermelon. I couldn't eat it, but she took it and rubbed it on my lips. And then the good points is I may have lost my work family, but the hospital family I still have. I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of them, so that's a good side of it.
Do you want to delve into losing your work family? Tell me about that return to work.
I'm trying to think here. Okay, I went back to work November the 1st, 2015, which was really too quick, but I was determined. Then it was in February. I came home and I called my doctor and I said, I'm vibrating and I don't know what's wrong with me. And what it was anxiety. But I mean, my whole body was shaking. And this is part of this whole process. You learn, and every patient, I'm sure, is different. But I came home and then I think I emailed my boss and said, I think I got PTSD. And finally, I went to my critical care doctor and I said, I can't do it anymore. I would leave meetings and go back to my desk. A lot of days I would just come home and I'd walk out the back door and wouldn't tell anybody where I was going, and I would just come home. And then I went on disability.
So tell me about that relationship with your critical care doctor.
She is my angel, and if you look on my website, she is my angel, and I love her to death. And I'll tell you what, and I feel sad I'm on some other support groups and things, and it's sad that every patient that I've talked to or a person that's went through something like this, that they don't have a critical care doctor like I had, because she helped guide me through every step. Disability, she has a clinic, so she don't believe in just sending a patient home to a family doctor yet. And so I would go up there, I think it was every week or every other week, and then we all went to every month, but I went to her clinic, and still do. And from day one, every Christmas, we always got her something. Well, this year she was working because of COVID. And I asked her, I said, do you mind giving me your address? And she gave me her address. And we pulled up at her house, and her 2 kids was peeping out the window, and they didn't know whether to come out or not. But we had like 2 bags of gifts for the kids, for the whole family. And it was a blessing to be able to see her kids. I can text her, I can email her anytime. And there's not a lot of patients that have a doctor that they can text or email.
That's amazing.
And just from the beginning, she was probably the third, because it's a rotation shift. So I had been there in ICU with him for a couple of days, maybe 3, before she actually came up on the scene. And I'll never forget, I journaled the entire time. I kept a journal. And I'll never forget, I wrote in my journal, God sent me an angel today. Oh. From the beginning, she would draw, just like I was a child, she would draw on the board and explain things to me. Because, this medical terminology, this was not my area of expertise. Right. And I just was overwhelmed. It was constant, like, well, we've got to do this procedure. Will you sign? Here's the complications, and here's what might happen. Will you sign? Oh, we're going to do this procedures. Will you sign? And she actually took time and explained it to me in a way that I could understand, just always. And even the night that he almost died and I had to leave, Immediately, the first thing she thought was to call me in and to talk to me, and again to explain things to
That's
me.
great. Well,
And so,
yeah,
And
no, so I'm
I want to
curious.
give you one more example, real quick.
Sure.
This past November, I had a cyst, a rupture, and I went to the local doctor, and they couldn't do any good with it. And it got like the size of a baseball. And so I knew I needed to go to the emergency room. I wasn't going to wait a week to see a doctor here. So I went to UK, and I texted her, told her I was on my way, and she came to the hospital, and she stayed with me for 3 hours, and they operated on me that night. We got there
on Thanksgiving.
yeah, on Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
That's impressive.
we have a bond with her.
Yeah.
That it's just good.
Well, so you brought up the way that you received information, Sarah. I'm really curious throughout this entire process how you accessed information. Did you? And I'm sure you were saying you didn't know the term sepsis, right? A lot of people don't. Did you Google it immediately? Were you looking for symptoms?
Okay.
Were you looking for outcomes? Like, tell me about that trying to access that information.
Okay, well, I tend to be, I'm very cautious about Googling things just because I am a teacher and I know that not everything that you Google is fact.
Right. True.
And so I'm real cautious about that. I guess my biggest thing was I just asked questions. We had one person in our neighborhood that was a medical professional, and she kept sending me all this stuff. And I'll be honest, it was too much.
Oh.
I needed to access it when I was ready. I think if you get too much all at once, it's completely overwhelming. And he had so many issues, and I really appreciated that it was very so that I can understand, because I don't know that I would have even understood the word sepsis, but I understood, hey, we're bleeding in our lungs, and we've got to stop this bleeding from happening. As that person. Should I have asked more questions? Maybe, but I had complete faith in the medical community there. And anytime they got ready to do something, they always explained it to me. And if I had questions, I could ask. And I'm a pretty straightforward person that I would ask. So it wasn't, some people get real disgruntled. I'll never forget the one night his brother was like, well, I think we should move him. What are they doing? And I'm like, you know what? No, we're staying. At this point, we're in this journey. They're doing all they can because it was unknown. I can't tell you how many tests they ran. And like even the people that would run the test, the little ladies, in fact, I would laugh. I called one of them the little bird lady. But they ran all these tests, and they would come in and they'd say, well, it's not this. And I said, well, how do you know? And then they explained the whole process of how basically you would run these cultures. If it didn't react, then that's not the issue. And so I learned a lot about how they detected. It's not a true science. And I'll be honest, Dr. Montgomery would tell you right now that they're still not 100% sure, but if she had to pick a cause, they landed on the anesthesia. Okay. But it was very odd, and they're still not 100% sure of what happened. But they were very apt on taking one step at a time and dealing with one problem at a time. And they told me when we went from one step to the next, for example, when they took him off the blood thinner, because here we've got a man that's had knee surgery, you need blood thinner for not blood clots, but they're bleeding. And so it was finally decided that they were going to take him off. And they said to me, that he may get blood clots. And we went within 3 days. Well, we got to day 2, and I thought, whew, we've made it. Day 3, his legs got bigger than I can imagine. And again, there was a nurse there explaining to me all the way. So I wasn't a big Google person, and I'm kind of glad that I wasn't, because I think it would have scared me more. And I don't think at that point it would have helped me. I don't think I needed to know all that.
Darrell, what about you when you got home? I mean, I know you'd mentioned that when you went to work, you'd be researching and that sort of thing. I'm curious about what you researched and, how you found, for example, the Sepsis Foundation or, any of those organizations. Like, how did that happen?
while I was at work for 9 months, I only worked maybe 5% of the time. I had a desk, and so I sat at my computer 7 hours out of 8, and I would Google everything I could learn about sepsis, about ARDS, about PTSD, about long-term ventilation. And I think I joined a Facebook group on sepsis while I was at work. And that's kind of how I found it. Well, I know it is because I found a support person in another state. And I would tell her I was vibrating at work, and she'd say, call me. And I would. So she was a big support to help me understand what I was going through, because I didn't have a clue what was happening to me.
Wow. And you found her through the Alliance online, on internet. Wow.
Yes.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. So then how did that lead you? You said your one word now is purpose. So what did that lead to? You're reaching out to the organizations and that kind of thing. What became your purpose?
My purpose is helping others and giving back what's been given to me. I have, like I said, I have more of a purpose now in life than I ever did as being an engineer. And I wouldn't trade the last 5.5 years of my life
How do you give back, Darrell?
To do it now?
What do you do? I know now with COVID it's different, but how do you give back? How did you give back pre-COVID?
Well, Dr. Montgomery helped me get started with it all. And I told her, I need to go on disability, and she said, I may have a job for you, or said, I'll get back to you. So maybe a year went by, and she said, do you want to be on a panel? And I said, sure, I want to help give back. So I joined a panel, and I'm still on it today. We meet once a month, and it's for a UK hospital. It's like 12 of us. And then from there, I'm trying to think. Then I volunteered just in a UK emergency room, and I'd go get patients, blankets, and water, anything that I could do. And then Dr. Montgomery said, now it's time to move up to ICU and mentor critically ill patients. So I did that for 2 years. And I've always been involved with sepsis, and actually my wife's a teacher and teaches FCCLA, and she sponsors FCCLA. She got it
up just a little bit. So there we go. Okay, now we can see it. Yeah.
So we talked about it one day, and I was in the car, and I said, "What about FCCLA helping raise money for sepsis?" And because she has a lot of ties and taught for 34 years, it all worked out that they agreed to do it for 3 years. And so now all the schools started wanting me to come speak at their school. And then from schools, it progressed to local hospitals, or it progressed to just anything.
Wow.
And then before you know it, Dr. Montgomery nominated me for International ICU Hero of the Year. And so I got that award. We flew to San Diego, and I got that award. And I got a
And she
sepsis.
flew with you? Your critical care
Yes.
doc flew with you?
Yeah, if you look, you should see a picture of my nurses and Sarah and her. Yes.
You're not kidding your family. That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And it's kind of like one opportunity led to another.
Yeah.
And we were very blessed that I had a state officer at the time, and so they do an impact project community service. And so I just basically said to them, what about if we do this? And it wasn't just about raising money, it was about awareness. Because that's been one of his biggest things is people do not know.
They don't know.
They don't know sepsis. They don't know what it means to be septic, how you can become septic. So it wasn't just about raising money, although we did raise over $30,000,
Wow.
which I think for high school students is a lot of money.
For sure.
But the other part of that was to do booths and presentations. And so that's kind of why he got into speaking. And one group would hear him and they'd say, oh, well, you come. And then at that group might be somebody in a different discipline. And it's just like, and he's spoke at some places at the community. We did a booth at Ham Days. He's been at UK and spoken at some things. He's been to some career technical centers.
I've traveled probably the whole state of Kentucky. Several times I've driven 3 hours just to speak for 30 minutes and then turn around and drive back.
Wow.
And I just want to say that I still think we owe a lot to Dr. Montgomery, because she knew that he was struggling and she knew that he needed a purpose. So that was probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
He had been this active breadwinner of his family, and all of a sudden everything that he knew was taken away from him. So many people that suffer from PTSD and depression and and have those suicidal tendencies, she knew that was key to finding something that he could do. And before this, he would tell you, I'm the public speaker. I'm the one, as you can probably tell, that goes on and on and on. But so that was kind of out of his comfort zone. But that's been a healing for him to go and to share his story. And it was super important, I think, on this journey for us, that he knew that I supported him.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate that I could support him.
So let me ask you, when you were sitting by his bedside, Darrell, you're talking about all the tubes coming in and out, right? It's quite a setting, right? When you're in that kind of a, ICU situation. How would you feel about, and I'm going to throw the term out, artificial intelligence. I don't know, if you know much about that, but if you think about smart cars, that drive you and you don't have to drive them, things like that. It's the gathering of raw data and learning from it. If you can imagine a computer sitting next to the bed, and that computer is accessing all the raw data, whether it's, just constant blood pressure takes or, whatever it happens to be that they're checking, all the tubes and connectors and catheters that they have, in him. And then it's gathering the same information from many, 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 many other patients, pulling it together, and then actually predicting what might happen next. And then what you do with that intelligence is you help the doctor make decisions about what they might, want to do, what kind of treatment, what kind of therapy they might want to do. What do you think about AI? Maybe I'm throwing it out there, to you for the first time, but this is something that's kind of entering, the hospitals now in a pretty big way. And so I'm just kind of wondering what patients are thinking about this kind of big data, these computer technology, all of that. How you might feel about that guiding your physician's course of treatment.
I guess, again, I'm a pretty open-minded person. So, having been through this journey, my first thought is that I was willing to do whatever it took to save his life. And there were a lot of things that were done that was probably a little atypical. So, and he had so many machines already. So my first thought would be, what's another machine? Yeah. But my thought is, if that's something that you can learn and help, it's just like anything else. It doesn't mean it's going to give you the perfect answer. Mm-hmm. But I think Dr. Montgomery would have, even if she was sitting right here, she would say they were constantly looking for answers to what was causing this, because it was a little atypical. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's just doing any kind of research. If that's another avenue that would have been assistance, just knowing, though, that it's not the all and end all. Just right. Because it says do this, that doesn't mean that that's the final answer. But if that gives you another view, mm-hmm. Or another perspective, and if it can help someone else later down the road, I think that's our thing. Go ahead.
One thing I noticed, I had a little wristband on, mm-hmm. which had a barcode. And every time, you mentioned it, I touched on it, but every time they came in to do anything, they'd have to scan my arm. Mm-hmm. And, it would automatically put whatever medicine or whatever they did into the computer system.
That's part of it. So what do you think, Darrell? Would you trust AI? Would you trust her? Okay.
100%.
Okay.
I used to be involved in automation.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'm talking to the right guy then. You could have explained it better than I could, I'm sure.
I love technology. So yes.
Okay.
And I'll tell you something real briefly. Yeah. That I've been an engineer, and while I was in the hospital, the human touch is a medicine in itself. Just someone holding your hand because you're scared. Yeah. And I've done some research, but I've considered buying a doll, a heated, like mannequin.
Yeah.
And I've done look, and they can actually talk as well. But if I was a patient in bed, you ain't going to turn your head around to see who it is, but it feels like a real human being, and put their hand, and all it's got to do is touch you, and it means the world to the patient.
I read that when you visit your, when you pre-COVID, when you were able to go to the emergency room and visit some of these patients, that you would ask if you could touch their feet.
Well, I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's when I was volunteering in ICU.
Yeah.
And because my memory is not the best, and I wouldn't remember their names, so I wanted to just touch their feet. And then when I got to the truck, I could pray for everyone I touched, and it worked good for me that way.
That's amazing. Well, so, we're sitting here looking at each other on a screen and a tablet. Typically, we like to bring our patients to our headquarters in Southern California, and we can actually engage, together, and we can sit in a room together and talk, through this. But with COVID, obviously, everything's changed. How has COVID changed your treatment journey, your doctor appointments? Tell us now how you're managing through this with COVID.
I pretty much stayed at home before COVID, except for going and speaking or volunteering.
Yeah.
It did cut out all of that. I don't go to the hospital and volunteer anymore.
Yeah.
And I can't go to any schools or any place like that and speak. And on the other hand, I was kind of used to staying at home when I didn't travel. And so staying at home hasn't been that hard on me during COVID.
Has it impacted the number of doctor visits you have? Or the
Say
type
again?
of, has it impacted the number of doctor visits that you've had, or has it impacted the type of visits? Do you do telehealth versus in person, or?
Most of my visits have been in person. Like I've got a psychiatrist I see,
Right.
my critical care doctor, my family doctor. They've all been in person.
You've done a few have you done a few teleconferences?
I don't think so.
Okay, I thought you did a couple on the phone in the very beginning.
Maybe I did. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I think he did a few on the phone when it was very.
But you prefer the in person with your
No,
doctors?
I don't. No,
Oh, you don't?
I would do. No, I'm in favor of telehealth.
Oh, okay, great. Tell me, when you and I had a chance to talk before this, even briefly, you brought up the connection between sepsis and COVID and the long haulers. Can you tell me a little bit more how you feel about that and what that connection is?
Well, again, I Google, and when I want to learn something, and then I look at the source also, because people don't look at things and they don't look at where it's coming from. But anyway, so I knew when they said they were getting sick and that it was going to their lungs. I mean, and it's a virus, it's an infection. I knew sepsis. So now if you Google, sepsis and COVID and ARDS, it all goes hand in hand. And it's just by their hospital stay and what's going on. I know they've had sepsis. I don't know if they're told that, but you hear on the TV a lot about this COVID patients, and calling them long haulers. I'm a long hauler myself. I know what it's like, and I know what some of these patients are going to live through. They probably don't know it yet, but I do, and I know they're going to be there. You're probably going to have more people on disability in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to me you just said. I can remember a nurse telling me that, when we finally got out of the woods, he was going to make it, but he would never be the same. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I was thinking physically, his body. But now I know he was trying to tell me much more. So part of me thinks maybe it would have been nice to have a little more information about what was coming. And maybe I should ask more questions than I did. But that's what he means by a long hauler, is that there is so much unknown out there, and it impacts. We've served on several panels now with other people, and everyone it impacts differently. So I don't think it can't be a true medical science. It's not a true, this is going to happen or not happen. But based on his experiences, when he says long hauler, he's in it for the long run. And it's not always an easy journey. but somehow, some way, you have to figure how to get through it and not just say, okay, this happened to me, poor pity me, I'm going to give up. And he has not done that. And he's constantly searching and finding information. And I think that's part of his purpose, is that if he can help someone else, he's blessed in the sense that, first of all, I want to say he's blessed because he has me. He's blessed because he has Dr. Montgomery. He does have a pretty good support system, but there are so many others out there whose families are not willing. We went through a really difficult time, and I had lots of people say to me, why are you hanging around? And my comment then and now still is, we are a team. We took a vow. You just don't jump ship when things get difficult. And I think so often today people want to give up too easily. And he even says he's mentored some people, and his comment has been, I want to help them, but they got to help themselves too.
Right. Well, so Darrell, what is quality of life to you? What does that mean to you now? Now in the, you've lived with this for some time. You're calling yourself a long hauler. What does quality of life mean?
My quality of life is different. I ain't gonna say it's better or worse. It's just different. And I'm probably more emotional now, but everything that's came to me, I have learned to accept. It took me a year and a half after I got out of the hospital to realize I wasn't going to get any better. And I tried all different types of drugs, thinking that one pill was going to help. No, it didn't. I even was suicidal at one point. It just, I was scared. Didn't know what was going on. And
you didn't ask me, but
I was about to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for his quality of life, he is much more appreciative of the small things. His focus is much different. It was before he was working and making a living and focused on building cars and all those kinds of things. Now his quality of life is living one day to the fullest, each and every day, and appreciating the moments with our grandchildren. The time that we can have together. I'm retiring at the end of the year, spending that time together, helping. He is such a helper. I mean, the list of people that he's constantly providing all kinds of assistance to. So in that sense, the quality of life, I think, is much better because he stopped to smell the roses and to appreciate those things. You hear all these poems to appreciate the little things in life. He takes nothing for granted. So to me, in that sense, his quality of life, I think, is much better. It's also helped me to refocus a little bit on the things that are truly important and caring for others. So in that sense, his quality of life is better. Now, physically, there are things he gets frustrated with. He'll say, it tears him up that he gets out of breath or he has to take a break or some of those kinds of things. When a lot of people think about that kind of quality of life, but I don't think he would trade that.
No, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't trade it.
Wow. Are those grandbabies close by, I hope? Not
about an hour.
Oh, that's not so bad. That's a drive away. That's great. Well, is there anything else that you wanna share that I haven't asked? This is just any open time. Anything else that you wanna make sure that our colleagues know? Because the purpose of this session that we're having right now is so that my colleagues at Edwards can really listen to the patient so that we can be better at helping our patients. In fact, the mission of Edwards Lifesciences, you may have seen it, but it's helping patients. It's our life's work, and life is now. And the way that we try to fulfill that mission is by talking to patients so that we can help other patients. So is there anything else that you want to add that might be able to help our colleagues?
Well, I just say with my background of being an engineer and being a patient, I would have a lot of ideas and be more than happy to help Edwards at any point. And you can pick up the phone, call me, you can email me, whatever you want to do. Like I said, I help all the time, and I volunteer for everything, which, like she said before, I wouldn't.
Be careful.
And-
We'll take you up on that, Darrell.
No,
you
I'm
know we will.
serious.
You know
No.
we'll bring you in as one of our family
Right,
members.
here again,
So
if you call me every day, that's my purpose. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's how I look at it. I would want you to call me every day or welcome it, and because it gives me a sense that my life's not being wasted, that I can give back, even though maybe I can't climb a hill because of my lungs,
Yeah.
and even though I got PTSD, it's just a good feeling to know that someone reaches out to me and wants anything. I mean, I'll talk anything.
And I would probably say, again, I was very blessed. I have a good support system and I'm pretty strong, but I think there needs to be more out there for those caretakers. We focused so much on him, and we did, it's whatever. And I wanted to always be there for him. And luckily I have a very good, strong support system, and I have ways of taking care of myself. But I know a lot of people who are in that situation, that themselves become an emotional mess. And so, there was a clinic for him and those kinds of things, but just having a support group for people, the caregivers afterwards, because it was like after we left the hospital, there was no one there to minister to my needs as such, I guess. And again, we were very fortunate that we had a very good relationship and with Dr. Montgomery, and because I wanted to make sure I didn't do the wrong thing, if that made sense, because sometimes I could do things, and I didn't aim to, but sometimes I would do things or say things that could aggravate the situation. And so knowing that and having a support system, I know there's lots of counselors and lots of things out there, but having more support for the caregivers after the fact, I think.
Thank you for that, Sarah. That is so important, and we hear that, especially when we're doing a discussion with a sepsis survivor. Having the caregiver there is so important because you've lived through much of what they don't know about. They were not even awake at the time, and then of course all the the comfort and help afterwards. So thank you for that. And with that, we'll go ahead and close. I think for the meantime, Darrell, you've put it out there, so you may be hearing from us again. But unless there's anything else, I'll let you have your day back. I know, Sarah, that you worked all day. You were a school teacher all day. You got an award today. Congratulations. And then you came home and extended your day for us. So thank you for that. We appreciate you both so much.
Well, thank you for having us. And we're both all more than willing to share our story anytime. We want to do whatever we can help others.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It gives me a purpose and something to do rather than staying home and watching TV all day.
And we're a team.
Yep.
I can tell that for sure. You definitely are.
We went to the hospital together and we walked out together, and we will continue to do this journey together.
Wonderful. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you.